Well, thanks for coming back. In the last session, I did promise that we were going to start adjusting lighting so that we can get this graphic to look better. And I do make a distinction between lighting and coloring. We're interested in lighting right now so that we can continue with the design of our graphic. So I'm going to get on the lighting tab here, and you can kind of think of this as the beginning of our lighting functionality. And lighting, in terms of terminology, lighting encompasses both the lighting, the intensity of the light, the direction of the light, the quality of the light, the ambient light, and it mixes it all in with coloring. I'm going to try to make a distinction between coloring and lighting so that we can move forward on this project, kind of understand what we're doing. So this is the lighting tab. We have 6 different lighting sources or scenarios or setups. There's no documentation with the Mandelbulb3D. So in many cases, the terminology has not been established, at least not by a common author. So for lack of a better term, I'm going to call these, you got 6 lighting sources. The lighting source can be global or it can be spot, and it can be other things too. That's advanced stuff. We're going to need that. Okay. So lighting number 1. The checkbox here indicates that it's on. The light is on. I just turned it off. The global light for light 1 is turned on. And I have the color of the global light. All right. In this case, it's a little bit on the yellowish side, maybe simulating bright sun. I will leave it at that. That's the color. This right here is the intensity. All right, I can crank it up, I can crank it down. All right, I can do things like that. We'll just leave it right there. All right, these other things we'll get into, that's another time. And this right here is indicating that the light will include hard shadows. Okay, so, all right, that's just generally the light number 1 is on, it has a color, it has an intensity, and shadows are included. Now, here's my global light right here. I'm not interested in a positional light at the moment. I'm interested in the global. Now, this is interesting because we have a control here that says relative to object. And then we have a light Y angle and we have a light X angle. So a lot of what's going on in your scene, especially if it's a large vista, will have much to do with the light Y angle and the light X angle. What I always do is I always like to work with this checked on, relative to object. And you'll notice here that my sliders did move. And the reason that control, that option, checked on, the reason it's important is because you want your light to be relative to the object, the fractal object, not relevant to your camera. Because as you move your camera around, your light changes. All right, and there are scenarios where that's good. But if you're moving your camera around, you want the light to pretty much be stable, which is kind of interesting too, because if you have a stable light relative to the object, as you're moving your camera around, you're actually encompassing in your view the shadows that are cast by that light source. In other words, if you had your light relative to the camera, your shadows would also tend to follow your camera. All right? And so your shadows move. There might be a scenario where you want that. But me, especially if I'm in a large vista environment, I don't want my shadows to move relative to the light being cast onto the object. I don't want my shadows to move around. I want my camera to explore the environment. And I don't need my light source following my camera, typically. So relative to object is something that I always check that will fix the lights to they call it the scenery. I call it the fractal object or the fractal environment. Now, assuming that you have the light fixed to the scenery, now you can move your light X and Y, all right, up and down, and you can move your X angle. And the whole idea here is to settle that in. Let's just start right here, okay? Now here, the light source is coming from you. You have an X angle, you have a Y angle, and the light source is sort of like emanating from you. You don't normally want that. All right, so we'll do something like that. So I've got the light kind of sort of doing that. Okay. Now, if you watch down in here, all right, and you see how the detail comes out better when I get my light source like this. You see how the shadows are helping to define the object patterns. All right, that was the X. Here's the Y angle. Now let me just say this, that when you're working with a 3D object, especially an object like a fractal that's got lots of characteristics, lots of surface designs and curves and squares and straights and ovals and everything else, you can utilize the shadowing effect to great artistic value. You can put a lot of interest into your graphic scene or your object by utilizing the position of lighting that will create or simulate shadows which help define and give the sense of depth. All right, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm messing around with these X and Y light angles, so that I can really draw out the detail and give some depth. I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for the depth as indicated by shadows, and I'm also looking for what allows the details to not be lost in the highlight, where the light is so strong that the detail is lost. I'm trying to deal with that. All right. Okay. Now there's some other lighting functionality down here. We have object, we have ambient, we have dynamic fog. This is the back picture. We're not interested in that at the moment. I'm going to try to cover everything pertaining to Mandelbulb, but really within the context of an actual project, as we don't need a back picture at this time. So in the next session, we're going to talk about these controls down here with respect to lighting. Coloring is kind of mixed in with the whole thing, but I'm more interested in lighting at the moment. So how about if we continue this in the next session? I'll see you there.